Take the next right onto Causeway, A312. Continue on A312 for 1 mile. In 300 yards, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit onto the Parkway, A312.
The thing I'm particularly interested in is your view on whether you think Putin is actually interested in stopping at 3 feet from the Polish border, and whether you think he has his eye on the Baltic states and the northern passage through the Arctic as the sea recedes.
Thanks, Hannah. Bob.
Okay, Hannah, it's a really good question, and thank you very much indeed. And great to hear from an Islander, what can I say? Yes, he did. I think he took a very close interest because some of this money may have been his. So those oligarchs who are tied to the Russian state, and who've been named as being tied to the Russian state, I think Navalny had a list of 35.
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway. Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
This is absolutely part of state policy. We've got to understand, I think in my research, I think about 97 separate tools of Russian hybrid war. If I do a book of it, I assure you I will go to 100. But one of those is absolutely the use of oligarch power, and how oligarch power is used to provide political cover, economic power, or translate economic power into political power. Certainly in eastern Ukraine, you had oligarchs who had sweetheart deals with Gazprom, a big gas supplier. They made a fortune, but they were under instruction from the Russian secret agencies to reinvest that money for purchasing politicians, for buying up and funding political parties, for buying chunks of industry. So they employed thousands of people, and they turned those sweetheart deals into raw economic and political power to control. So oligarchs have always had a very important part in the modern Russian, in the modern Kremlin playbook. So for sure, Putin would have taken an interest, and that's the problem here, that a lot of those oligarchs here have been here as part of a state policy, although some of their enablers may not necessarily have realised that. When it comes,
I was going to say Nordic and the Balkans. I only make the point that the Baltics, rather. I only make the point that the Prime Minister is hosting leaders from Nordic and indeed Baltic states tomorrow and on Tuesday.
Do I think Putin's about to invade? I'll be very, very surprised if he is, because that's Article 5. He knows that, and he knows the way his troops are performing. They'll be shot to pieces.
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the second exit onto the M4 slip road to Heathrow Airport, M25.
Pick up with something. It will probably be with large-scale artillery bombardments, which is what the Russians did the Soviets did in World War II. That when their troops couldn't make progress, they just flattened everything, and that is sadly a danger now. Is that going to happen in the Baltics? No, but what may well happen is that the GRU dirty tricks people will go into the Baltic and will shoot up Russians, or shoot up Estonians and Latvians, or shoot up people on different sides of an ethnic divide in order to create tension, in order to divert attention away from what's happening in Ukraine, in order to up the ante, in order to escalate, because Putin is just escalating through the phases up at the moment. So I don't think he's going to try to invade. He would love to.
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
Besiege the Baltic republics, for sure.
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania being failed states. But I think the danger for us is not that he's going to try to invade, but he will try to kick off and foment and manipulate ethnic division, even if literally he has to do so by ordering his own people to carry out acts of provocation. And on that point, Camilla, I don't know, I'm sure you remember the 1999 apartment bombings that helped solidify Putin's reign, but also helped provide an excuse for the Second Chechen War. Now, a lot of people have said since, sadly, that might have been actually fostered by the FSB, by the Russian secret agencies themselves. So they are used to causing potentially provocations in which they kill some of their own people, as depressing and upsetting sounds.
Thank you. Very, very quick response, Hannah.
I was going to say that I think
Continue on M4 for 3 miles.
was to assume that Putin had taken over Russia to the extent that it was still the new Russia. But Putin is a KGB man through and through, and is surrounded by his mates from Leningrad in the 70s. And I think we forgot that as our peril.
Thank you.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's an academic called Stephen Blank who said, good 15 years ago, effectively what happened is that the KGB retook over the Russian state. I mean, on one hand, you could say that this was after a period of crisis where westernizers had failed to provide leadership, had failed to stabilize the country, and so you had the old Slavophile anti-Westerners sort of retaking the country in a sort of slight internal push. So I think that is unfortunately been proved right by circumstances really since 2007 onwards.
Thank you for that, Hannah. I'm just going to put a tweet that's come in from Matt Fry, LBC's presenter from 10 till 1 on Saturdays. He's obviously been out in Ukraine covering the war from the front line. And he's tweeted, which I think is an interesting question, some positive noises from both sides about talks in coming days. Is it genuine, or are they preparing for the customary pause in fighting after 3 weeks to regroup, rearm, reassess, then carry on? I fear the latter, but I hope I'm wrong. What do you think, Bob, about these talks?
Well, I think it might be either. The Russians have a habit of breaking ceasefires. So in the Abkhaz War in 1991, they reached a peace settlement on a couple of occasions, broke them at very short notice, and effectively had only ever used the ceasefires to regroup, refreshen their forces, rearm, get new supplies through until they were able to push on ahead. So I've absolutely no doubt that the Russians, and potentially the Ukrainians as well, but it's very much part of the Russian playbook to use ceasefires to regroup, and their military needs to regroup, because I suspect the morale is poor. And I was talking to an old Soviet Russian expert, Chris Donnelly, this afternoon, and Chris reckoned that in fact they'd deliberately gone in order to fool the Ukrainians. They'd gone in fast without the required amounts of ammunition and fuel, which helped to create this sort of a deception, which I don't think worked particularly well. It may have fooled some Ukrainian seniors, but didn't, I don't think, fool folks on the ground, or indeed the Brits and the Americans who were listening to the signals. So I do think the Russians are going to be under pressure to regroup and to replan, yeah, for sure. I also, one thing about I wouldn't rule it out that actually that Putin is realizing this isn't going according to plan, gets something more than he already had out of it. If he thinks I've actually got to turn around and really shorten my position now at home, it is not impossible that there's lots of dynamics at work. One is going to be him escalating up in terms of threat to us, but the other one may be him pushing forward the dynamic to see if he can get something out of talks before his position at home becomes too unstable.
Brilliant, thanks Bob. Jerry's in Whitley Bay, and I think, Jerry, you've got a question about unexplained wealth orders. You're speaking to Bob.
Yes, no. Hi, Bob.
Hello.
Unexplained wealth orders came on.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Specifically for political influence and dirty money coming into the country from overseas. Yet they've been on statute for 4 years. None of the oligarchs left the country when they knew this legislation was coming.
Keep right to stay on M4.
Prosecute for 4 years. So why are we trying to get them now?
Yes, good question.
Political will before, and because there's a war now.
But do you think they're effective? I mean, as Jerry points out, only 4 people have been prosecuted, and not one of them's been Russian.
Yeah, but yes and no. They are effective legally, but there's got to be the will to enforce them, and there hasn't been up to now. And what can I say, Jerry? That has been a shame.
Jerry, your response?
Well, I think this looks like xenophobia and persecution because it's up to the law to be enforced by government, and the National Crime Agency is a part of the government. So either they're not funding the National Crime Agency, or the National Crime Agency is being muddled, or the National Crime Agency is useless.
I tell you, okay, you should go back and read the ISC report, the Intelligence and Security, well, the release of the report. I don't think we've ever seen the report, but if you go and read the release, the press release that accompanied the report, in fact, I didn't think that actually most of the report I've seen online, so I didn't think most of it's come out. And there is a specific line about the National Crime Agency, not being properly funded, but also because of the vast costs, and the fact is that the oligarchs can run up legal fees in the millions, and they will keep going after the NSC, and indeed employees of people like the Serious Fraud Office, who will go after individuals to make it really difficult for the National Crime Agency or the Serious Fraud Office to conduct perfectly lawful investigations. So one of the problems has been actually that we haven't funded these properly, and we haven't capped costs. So it is not untrue that the National Crime Agency hasn't always been able to do its job to the extent it should have done.
Thank you, Bob. Keep your calls coming into Bob Seeley, Tory MP for the Isle of Wight. Don't forget as well, he's a former soldier. He was a sergeant in the British Army. He served in Iraq and Afghanistan. So if you've got any military questions, keep them coming Bob's way. 0345 6060973. You can also text on 84850. Tweet at LBC. We'll come to more of your calls next, but first it's 6:30, and here's the news headlines with Tim Humphrey.
Russia has escalated attacks in western Ukraine with an airstrike on a military base close to the Polish border.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
134 wounded. Russia claims the site was storing weapons donated by NATO. Ukraine says it's restored a broken power line to the Chernobyl power plant, the scene of a nuclear meltdown in 1986, which is held by Russian troops. The power is used to run pumps which keep spent nuclear fuel.
Keep right to stay on M4.
Leaks. Pope Francis has told 25,000 people gathered in St. Peter's Square that the war in Ukraine is barbaric. He demanded a halt to the massacre of innocent women and children. And the weather, rain in the east clearing tonight. There will be some showers along the south coast, with clear spells inland where there could be a frost. More cloud in the north, with rain in the northwest, and a low of 1.
This is LBC.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nikki Kanani, GP and Medical Director of Primary Care in England. COVID-19 is still with us, so it's good that 12 to 15-year-olds can now get a second COVID-19 vaccine. Vaccines give your children the best possible protection against the virus and help to keep them in school. Get your 12 to 15-year-old vaccinated 12 weeks after their first dose. Book online or find your nearest walk-in centre at nhs.uk/COVID vaccination.
I am sorry. You have progressive memory loss.
When you hear these words, the outlook is bleak. But at Recognition Health, the brain and mind experts, we're working to change that. Volunteer for our clinical studies to receive free access to a new generation medication, as well as comprehensive medical screening. With your help, we can change the future of MCI and Alzheimer's disease.
You have progressive memory loss. But here's what we can do.
Go to brainandmindexperts.com.
We don't do slapdash. We don't do sloppy. We don't do bodge jobs. And we never do that'll do. We do a job properly. We're Trust a Trader, and we're proud of all our members and the great work they do in homes like yours. So when you need something doing, from locksmiths to landscaping, just type it into trustatrader.com and you'll get reputable, reviewed tradespeople in your area, because you can always trust a trader.
To help you travel with confidence on the TfL network, we're cleaning regularly with antiviral disinfectant, providing over 1,000 free hand sanitizer stations, and frequently circulating fresh air on tubes, buses and trains. To help everyone feel safe, we strongly recommend that you continue to wear a face covering when travelling on our services, unless you are exempt. Thank you for helping to keep yourself and others safe. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Control your central heating from your smartphone. Tado helps you save energy. Choose the room temperature you want it to be. Intelligent climate control for your home. Control your central heating from your smartphone. Tado. Your home, your comfort zone. Tado. Smart thermostats.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
I've been a lawyer for 32 years, and the one thing my clients want is to know that I'm on their side, that I'm giving them the right advice in an honest, straightforward way. Now, I'm nearing retirement and I'm trying to sort my money out, and I've realized that I'm looking for the financial equivalent of, well, me.
Welcome to NetWealth, an expert wealth management team with the latest technology and much lower fees than you might expect. Visit netwealth.com. Wealth management as it should be. When investing, your capital is at risk.
This is LBC with Camilla Tomini. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
Welcome back. It's 6:34 and I'm joined by Tory MP Bob Seeley. Just to give this conversation a bit of context, Bob, you lived in Ukraine, I believe, from 1990 to 94. So you were there at the coalface, really, at the fall of the Soviet Union. What was it like at that point? Because there's lots of talk that, you know, after everything that happened, some of these newly independent states were basket cases. I just wondered what it was like on the ground, what it was like living there, and what the people were like, Bob.
I mean, I always love the people because they're always, look, Russians are really nice people, so are Ukrainians, so are Georgians, so all those people from that part of the world. And, you know, they're like folks everywhere. You know, they were really lovely. I think the problem is with the political system that was incredibly corrupt and frankly evil. And I think that because we fought Nazi Germany and didn't fight the Soviets, I think we somehow thought that the ultimate evil was Nazi Germany. And actually, morally, there probably wasn't that much to choose between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. Certainly, you know, in the 30s and 40s. Clearly, you know, the Soviets stopped imprisoning millions of people by the early 50s, and they released many millions of their political prisoners. But it was still continued to be a brutal and deeply repressive state where you had no rule of law, where the party and the party truth was higher than the law. So, you know, the Soviet Union murdered millions in the name of class. The Nazis murdered millions in the name of race. I don't quite see a moral distinction because you're still murdering millions of people, you know, whether you're the Soviet Union or whether you're Nazi Germany. But, you know, the Russian people, the Ukrainian people were good people. And I think the Ukrainians, I lived in Kiev, but I traveled, I spent half my time there and half my time in Russia or, you know, Belarus or the Caucasus or occasionally Central Asia. In fact, deepest, you know, sometimes Siberia, etc. The people was really warm, but they had a horrible political system, as I say. And I think it's taken a long time for the Ukrainians to establish themselves. And I think, you know, they've still got quite a questionable political system that still needs a lot of work on. But I think as the younger Ukrainians have come through since the early 2000s onwards, there's been an absolute determination that they want to build a law-governed state and a democratic state and a decent state. And I think what they are trying to build is a just state, and we need to be helping them. And they've got some way to go on that, but they were formed. I mean, Putin has done more than anything to help make the Ukrainian state, because if it's true that nations are fortunate in war, the Ukrainian state, after 20 slightly ropey years, was very much fortunate in war, really under pressure from 2004 onwards, but in war from 2014, and now again fighting for its life.
That brings in Nick from Cardiff's question here on text. Does Mr. Seeley think that the Ukraine stands any chance of some sort of win? I appreciate that's a difficult question, but what do you think?
Well, it's a fascinating question, and thank Nick for the question. Look, in many ways, the Ukrainians have already won. I mean, the Russians have lost. Ukrainians will never again voluntarily live under a Russian yoke, under a Kremlin yoke. That's for sure. You know, does that mean that there isn't a path to victory for Putin? Yes, but it's an incredibly complex one. He's going to have to set up these mini people's republics like he has in Donetsk and Lugansk, which are just completely sort of FSB sort of criminalized fronts. He's going to have to set up all these in all the cities that he captures to have these sort of fake corrupted sort of Sovietized individuals sort of demanding liberation from Ukraine, or demanding no to NATO, or demanding yes to being with Russia. I can't see how he's going to win this war, and I can't see how he's going to keep Ukraine. The danger there is that he will escalate towards us, because as anyone, and I'm sure many of your listeners, when they saw Putin's statement and read his statement at the eve of this war, although Ukraine is the battleground, he views the West as the enemy. So there is no, I mean, he might well suddenly veer his attention very aggressively towards the West on some trumped up accusation, or indeed because he's found out the supply routes in Western Poland or Romania or wherever they are, and he wants to hit them. Sorry, Eastern Poland. Rather.
Yes. Well, on that subject and territory, let's bring in David now from Beckenham. David, what's your question for Bob?
Hi, Bob.
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
They might come into the war if Putin wants to escalate and, you know, drag them in. And my question is really, what could NATO do to Belarus? I know we can't do anything against Russia, but could we have predator strikes?
Exit at junction 6.
Forces or something like that?
No, because in the Russian eyes it would be exactly the same. Belarus has signed the Tashkent, I think it's the Tashkent Defence Pact.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Tons Lane, A355.
It was Russia's vehicle for trying to keep all its former Soviet republics close, and it hasn't really worked because the Georgians didn't want anything to do with it. I don't think the Moldavans did, and the Ukrainians certainly didn't either. But Belarus has effectively become an internal, become a quasi-colony of Russia again, in the sense that the Russians run its secret services, its military, its intelligence. The Belarusians have very little choice, and Lukashenko, just like Assad in Syria, knows that he is in power only because of Putin's men have kept him there. And so, when Putin rings up Assad and says, I want 15,000 troops, Assad says, yes, I'll send them tomorrow. And when Lukashenko is told to supply potential armed forces, he has no choice but to comply. And basically we need to treat it as part of Russia when it comes to NATO action, I'm afraid. However,
exit the roundabout onto Tons Lane.
Belarusian soldiers will be even lower than Russian soldiers, and actually I would not be entirely surprised if you saw some.
Continue on A355 for 1 mile.
Okay, thank you for that, Bob. Can I just ask you Gary's question from Southampton? Now, I appreciate it might sound sort of slightly scaremongering, but at the same time, this is the sort of question that I think people at home are asking themselves. People are very worried about what's going to happen in this escalating situation. Gary asks, can you please ask Bob what happens if we do end up in a third world war? What preparations are government making for us? Where's that information? I don't live in London, I have no undergrounds near me to go to. What preparations are being made to help protect us in the UK in the event of war? What was your response to Gary on that, Bob?
I'm afraid so. I'm not sure much in the way of preparation is being made, because I think we've been, one of the problems with the White War, it tends to be very, very slow to react to things. So I'm not sure there is any preparation, because I still think a lot of people are in the stage of this can't be happening. And I think having underreacted, for a long time, we need to think very, very carefully about how we avoid going down that route. And one of the things I've been calling for is that the authorities need to be wargaming, and NATO and the US, we need to be collectively running through scenarios at a very, very urgent pace. So how we can manipulate this war into a least bad situation and what we have to do, and to play our part in making that happen. And that includes talking to the Russians. However much we hate what they're doing, we need to be talking to them now, if only to find their state of mind. But we also now need to be putting down routes for when Putin does go in 5 days, 5 weeks or 15 years, we are talking to potential replacements, and not just the sort of pro-democracy activists that we like talking to, but people that we have a less comfortable conversation with. And we also have to be, wargaming a nuclear exchange and working out how to walk back from that, so we know all the decision points to prevent that happening. And I only hope it happens. But I'm afraid to say, I'm not that full of faith sometimes in Whitehall, as much as maybe I should be. I'm not. Sorry. Okay. Not trying to sound too negative.
The so-called blob. Now I think we've got Jason in Mayfair. Have we got Jason in Mayfair? He's got a question. Jason, you're through to Bob.
Jason, you live in Mayfair. You're not an oligarch, are you?
You're not an oligarch, Jason. You're living in Mayfair.
No, Mayfair, you're an oligarch.
No. I actually live in Montenegro. I just arrived back last night. I'm just visiting some friends in Mayfair, and they're not oligarchs either.
They're not oligarchs either. Oh dear.
Well, I agree with what you say a lot, except in one regard. I don't think we should be looking at the Baltic states as the next place. I think we should be looking at the Balkans. I remind that Putin is the only president in Europe that's not implemented sanctions on Russia.
Yeah, the Serbian president, Bob. What do you think?
Right, you just made a very good point, and I actually was going to bring it up earlier, but I didn't want to whistle for too long. I was in Sarajevo about 4 weeks ago. You're absolutely right. People there are very worried. The Bosnian Serbs have been armed with small weapons, but they have been armed by the Russians. I think the Russian GRU is allegedly which is the military intelligence, are operating into Bosnian Serb territory, under various guises, but they're there. And you're absolutely right that what Putin has done is effectively take this managed conflict model where he starts a war that he then forward controls. We enjoy
in a quarter of a mile, turn left onto Buckingham Avenue.
2014, sort of paramilitary groups and politics. He's actually transferred that into Bosnia and Herzegovina, so that he can potentially spark up another controlled conflict there, and again in a way of taking up our attention off Ukraine, getting us to focus elsewhere, getting us worried about the consequences of the Ukrainian war. So you're absolutely right, and that's a very good point. And the GRU are operating with the Bosnian Serbs, sadly, as we speak.
Turn left onto Buckingham Avenue.
Well, I think that's true, Bob, but the real worry is Montenegro. Montenegro is a NATO member, and I will tell you that the new head of the Serb Orthodox Church in
Continue on Buckingham Avenue for 3/4 of a mile.
saying that this war in Ukraine is actually because of communists and socialists in the world who are attacking Orthodoxy.
Okay.
And this is now the head of the Serb Church in Montenegro.
Thank you, Jason.
No, Jason. That's a very good point, because as we know, the Russians tried to putsch in Montenegro 4, 5, 6 years ago now, and they failed, but they're still kicking off there. It is a member of NATO. That's a very good point.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. Keep your calls coming into Bob Seeley 0345 6060 973. After this, I'm going to be asking him whether he'd be willing to take in a Ukrainian refugee. You're listening to Camilla Tominey on LBC. It's 6:45.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Rachel Johnson.
It's day 18 of the war on Ukraine. My question to you is simple tonight. How do you assess the West's response so far?
Rachel Johnson on LBC.
Is your business truly unlimited? At 3, we think it should be. Whether you want to connect a team of 10 or 200, our business SIMs offer unlimited calls, texts, and data, all for just £7.50 each. Plus, with no data caps, when we say unlimited, we mean unlimited. Search 3 Business or visit us in store.
£7.50 when you buy 10 or more SIMs. 24-month plan excludes 20% VAT. Terms apply. See 3.co.uk/terms/business.
This year, I didn't choose golf. Every dreamer who has destiny deserves a shot. Flippin' heck. Based on the remarkable true story, The Phantom of the Open is the feel-good film of the year.
No one can say you didn't try.
Starring Mark Rylance and Sally Hawkins. Aim for the stars. The Phantom of the Open. Only in cinemas from March 18th.
So you now earn me not just 1, but 1.5 membership rewards